r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. Boomers of Reddit. What stupid things did teenagers do when you were a teenager? I am a boomer. I smoked banana peels to see if they'd get me high. They didn't. I hitchhiked around the country alone as a female. People were good to me. I smoked banana peels to see if they'd get me high. Were you inspired by the Donovan song? We used to run and jump into people's garage doors then run away. I think this one takes the cake. It's not the most exciting, but the risk reward is just non-existent. My dad and his sister were thick as thieves growing up. One day his mom found his stash of Playboys. His sister said they were hers and then had to spend the next 2 years in therapy. Damn. Sister of the year. But this is akin to blocking a bullet for someone wearing Kevlar. My dad says that teenagers of different cliques would have midnight drunken brawls in empty lots. Reminds me of The Outsiders. Prank phone calls. Caller ID ruined them. 67 my dude. According to my dad, who's a boomer. Drink and drive apparently. He said teenagers would drive up to the square every weekend and drink until the cops showed up at about 1 AM and told them to go home. I guess people didn't think much of drinking and driving back then. My dad was born 1950. Typical hippie who went to Woodstock. He said cops would pretty much determine your ability to drive drunk by if you were capable of driving without spilling your beer. If you couldn't, you had to walk home. My grandpa told me my dad once did donuts in his backyard. When asked why, my dad claimed he was chasing a rabbit. I'm fairly certain hallucinogens were involved. He literally said he was chasing a rabbit. He told you verbatim that hallucinations were involved. When my boomer dad was a teenager, he and his dumbest friends would put bullets on the train track and then run for cover when the train came by, shooting at them. I believe that in every generation, there will be the same level of childhood stupidity, but there will just be different stunts. According to my boomer mom, iron their hair. Hair straighteners didn't exist yet. So girls with naturally curly or wavy hair would put their hair down on an ironing board and iron their hair to straighten it. My mom told me about doing that. The hippie stick straight look was in and we both had curly hair. I am thankful I have a straightener when I want to not have curls. I'm not a boomer, but my granddad told us what they did when they were teenagers. In the winter, they used to jump off from tall roofs into thick layers of snow. Someone always broke a bone, but it didn't stop him doing it next year. In the summer, they used to travel by foot to local farm areas or woods to find abandoned houses, barns, cottages, etc. to steal stuff from them. They took something like hunting rifles, alcohol, clothes and other money worth things. I'm in my early 30s and this sounds like what we did as kids. Youth on the Canadian prairies. Dad was born in '44. Raised in a rural area of Sweden. These are some things he have admitted to doing growing up. Catching adders and embalming them in alcohol. Gather all the boys in the village the days before Walpurgis night. Try to sneak over to the next village and light up their bonfire ahead of time. Also fist fight the boys from the other village when they try and do the same to their bonfire. When the vicar's son got 2 pairs of proper boxing gloves, they started a backyard boxing club that ran until my dad managed to dislocate the jaw of the earlier mentioned son of the vicar. They make, smuggle, and drink moonshine. Steal mopeds and bicycles for joyrides. My aunt's husband grew up in the far north. They did pretty similar things. And blew up frozen stacks of manure with dynamite for shits and giggles. Literal shits and giggles. My boomer dad shot a BB gun inside of a small, enclosed space made out of cinder blocks to watch the pellets ricochet off the walls. My brother pointed his BB gun at my sister's feet and said, "Dance." She refused and he shot her foot. Luckily construction boots were in style, so no injury, and brother paid her $5 not to tell the folks. My grandma used to break in the local, major international airport to graffiti the planes in the hangar. Back then they would cycle to the perimeter fence and get in via a hole they'd made. The police would turn a blind eye simply because they couldn't be bothered to do anything, as they figured the airport airlines would just fix the damage. They got involved when one of the teens tried to break into a plane. He planned to fly it. whilst the police took him, and most of the gang, back to the station and tried to scare them with the threat of jail time. What actually did it was the guy's dad told the group that if you ever went to the airport again he'd break their legs, and he meant it. Imagine breaking into an airport now as a teen. You'd actually just be shot. And the idea of trying to break into an actual plane is just mad. My dad says he used to have drive-by firework fights. He also got water guns banned from the entire school district when he was in middle school. I'm almost 30. I have a 1 inches long bald streak on the back of my head where I got hit with a Roman candle during a firework fight. It still happens. No hair has grown there for like 20 years now. My uncle told me they didn't wear helmets when riding motorbikes because it's better to die quickly rather than slowly or worse end up brain damaged. Made sense really. Medical professionals call them donorsickles. In order to donate major organs the deceased pretty much is to be young and healthy. Not a boomer myself, but heard a lot of stories from relatives. College prof told a relative they'd only let him pass if the swan, a statue of a swan, grew feathers. Next day the swan was covered in feathers. It took them some glue, some pillows, and they created a new tradition. A neighbor gifted to my dad and his friends a car. None of them had a license. Also, it wasn't his car. Just a random car parked in front of his house for months that annoyed him. So naturally they took it for a ride and got caught right away. Police took him back home to my granddad and told him, here's your son. Slap him. As far as I know my uncle was the only one in the history of my college that went to campus on skis. He decided it was too nice of a day with a lot of snow to waste it. So he went ski running in the morning and slided down from the hill to campus for lectures. There was a square where my dad and all the other kids assembled. If anyone found out there was a house party nearby the news spread quick amongst them and in a short time the place got raided by a lot of strangers. It once also happened to my dad and he started getting noise complaints. So he did what he, in his mildly illuminated state, thought was the best way to get the others to lower the sound. He stood up on the table and yelled, shut up. The neighbor lady has cancer. The ski thing sounds more awesome than stupid. Steal stuff. Vandalize stuff. Sniff glue. Cut school to go downtown and steal stuff. Vandalize stuff. Lolo God 1971 was fun. Damn, how did your life turn out after this you/homeless granddad? I just missed the cute off to be a boomer. My older sisters made the cut. For me. Festival seating, rock concerts with the smoke so thick you couldn't see across the arena. Drag racing and cruising up and down the main street downtown. Getting busted by the cops at age 16-17 with a bunch of open booze in the car. Being told to take that wherever you're going to drink it and stay there. If I see this car out again tonight, you're in trouble. We once tapped a small keg of beer and put it in the back seat. My sister was in college during the worst of the Vietnam War. Her dorm seceded from the Union. They established a monarchy with a sort of LSD-based parliamentary system. A standing army guarded the doors with fire extinguishers and trash cans full of water. They kept it up until the town's mayor asked them formally to rejoin the Union. And also mentioned that he didn't feel obligated to supply electricity and water to a foreign government. They came to terms shortly thereafter. Race trains and cut across the tracks at the last moment. Have 3 friends that died doing this. The survivor suffered permanent brain damage. We continued this even after that accident. And oh yeah, alcohol and pot were involved. Just Darwin Awards. Bro. I got a lot of replies. And what I'm gathering from this is boomers love doing donuts on people's yards. Porn. And drinking. All sex, drugs and rock and roll. I also, though I'd share. My Gen X mom used to go to the roof of their apartment and jump from roof to roof. My mom lived in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. She was 15 at the time. And they had a bunker stashed with food. Which they never needed to use. My mom would sit in the bunker, read, and eat all of the rations. She still feels bad about that one. Jumping from roof to roof sounds fun. Answering on behalf of my mom, who is a boomer, but no Reddit. She was born in 1952 and grew up in New York City. Here is what she said they did. I'm typing as she's talking. Tan topless on top of tall buildings so no tan lines. Got alcohol and rode a subway drinking. Woodstock. Her and my dad always giggle when she brings up Woodstock, so there's probably a good story there that I probably don't want to hear. Got a bunch of friends together, partied in the street, and one time there was so many of them they had to shut down part of Second Ave. Water balloon fights from one building to another. Apparently my uncle and his friends used to get nudie magazines and keep them in the pews at the synagogue. Spiked egg creams. Smoke weed double dutch on the sidewalk during rush hour. Get conscripted against firewall and died in Vietnam. I was really little at the time, but I remember seeing my oldest brother rocking back and forth on the sofa in front of the TV saying, "Please don't pick me. Please don't pick me," while they were drawing for the draft. I lived in the San Fernando Valley in the 70s. After spending almost a year's pay on a surfboard, I'd hitch rides to Malibu almost every chance I could. If someone was going that way, I'd throw my lot in and head down the Ventura Freeway. One summer, my clan of surfers, loadies, and stoners jumped in 3 different vans and headed to the beach for 5 days of surfing and camping. When it came time to leave, I was still down at the shore scrapping wax off my board and they took off without me. Everyone assumed I was in another van without checking. I found a payphone and got a hold of one of my friend's parents who promised to send him back to get me. But the group decided to party till dawn before going home. All I had on me was a surfboard, t-shirt, cut-off jeans, a wetsuit, and maybe $4 in change. I ended up sleeping on a lifeguard tower in my wetsuit, occasionally dodging LA County Sheriff deputies in the rocks at Leo Cabrillo. I guess word got around and all my friends ended up coming back to get me the next day. Breakfast burritos and Coke for lunch, and I slept all the way back to the valley. The first thing that comes to my mind is muscle cars. A good muscle car required 3 things. 1. It looked good, washed it pretty much every day. 2. Ran like a bat out of hell. We had a quarter-mile track marked outside of town. And 3. It was so loud it woke up the residents of the cemetery. All I can do is laugh at those cars today that sound like a wounded popcorn popper. I had a candy apple red 1965 Ford Galaxy 500 with a 394 barrel, 4-speed Hurst shifter, glass pack mufflers, and red and white tuck and roll interior. It was the 3rd fastest car in town. One final feature was to have a girl who sat so close to you that you couldn't tell who was driving. It got 8 miles per gallon at the most, but gas was 33 cents a gallon. So WTH. We drove like indie drivers and were lucky to make it out alive. I was doing 95 on gravel on the way home last night. Would that make me a rallycross driver? Smoked cigarettes. Sneaked the family car out in the middle of the night and cruised around before I was old enough to get a license. Mild by others' experiences, I'm sure. My dad was a teen in the 70s and had a rich friend who had a pilot's license and access to a single-engine Cessna. One day they thought it would be awesome to fly it under a tall bridge and then turn around and do it again. 30 years later my dad told me about it and was surprised that I reacted as though he had told me a story of horrifying stupidity. In the winter, when we were 12, we bumper hitched. You grab onto the back bumper of a car, squat down and ski. Boots with little to no tread on them helped. You needed at least 2 kids to make it work best. The first guy distracts the driver at a stop sign by pointing at his wrist as in, "Do you have the time?" while the driver is making sure the little sweetheart isn't late for dinner. The other guys are grabbing on the bumper as the driver pulls away. Our little sweetheart keeps the car close enough that he can duck down and either grab the inner wheel well or a corner of the bumper. Asking for the time through the passenger window was best, as not all cars had passenger side mirrors at the time, so your duck down maneuver went unnoticed. Sometimes you could get a good ride that would take you all the way home. I lost a few pairs of mitts when releasing though. Must have freaked the driver out when they got home to see 2 perfectly spaced mittens stuck to the bumper. Gen X. But I know my boomer parents did the same thing they let us do. Blow up toys and various other things with firecrackers and cherry bombs, as well as launch bottle rockets and very explosive aerial fireworks. Fireworks were largely unregulated when we were little. I'm surprised I have all my fingers. My dad strapped a World War II paratrooper parachute to the bumper of his VW Bug. Apparently it stopped it real quick. Not a boomer, but my uncle is. He would take the brass out of .22 bullets and stuff paraffin wax in there instead. He would then shoot the neighborhood kids with the wax bullets. He also shot his own eye out, so they're that. Ducking like and subscribe.